and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. Before we get to the show, let's get the pleasantries out of the way.
First of all, our website. If you want more information about our little podcast, go to wearethecontrarians.com. That's where you'll find links to our old episodes, to our Patreon channel, and to our awesome Contrarians merch.
You can show your support by buying a Contrarians mug or a pillow.
I like the laptop bags myself.
Second of all, if you enjoy the show, tell your friends. Or even go a step further and leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts.
Finally, if you want to reach out directly to us, that's what social media is for. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at Contrarian Prime, or check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
Julio runs our official Twitter account at Contrarian Prime, but if you want to give me a piece of your mind or just want to banter about pro wrestling, you can follow me at Contrarian Alex.
That's it. That's our intro.
Now, time for the show.
This is all
And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for The Mutations.
Also known as the Freak Maker.
What is that? Is that the American re-release?
No, it just says that the Mutations, like on IMDb, the Mutations doesn't even pull up. It's the Freak Maker. And then on the Wikipedia page, it said it was also released under the name The Mutations.
It's like how the first Harry Potter movie is all over the world. It's Harry Potter and the... Oh, fuck. See, this would have been great if I actually remembered the Harry Potter titles.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I can't help you out with this one.
I think it's like all over the world. It's like Harry Potter and the Philosophy Stone, and then they dumbed it down for America, and it was like Harry Potter and like the Magical Stone or something.
The Big Mac.
Yeah, Harry Potter and the Big Mac.
Well, whatever the case, Freak Maker or Mutations, it means a triumphant return of Donald Pleasence to the Contrarians. Always welcome. As has been stated, every time he's come up, I'm never going to see him as anything but Dr. Samuel Loomis, but it's always welcome, especially for his performance here. So, welcome to the Contrarians.
Welcome, Dr. Pleasence. Would you say this is more intense or less intense than his performance in Wake and Fright?
Oh, I mean, it's hard to compare anything to that, but this isn't without its psychotic charm.
Alex, this is the beginning of the patron takeover, patron invasion of the main feed.
This is something you organized, and you've rounded up our patrons and gotten some picks, and this is the starting point, and which is kind of fitting because we're going to be in the lab, Frankenstein and all this shit together. But for the Mutations, a release in the U.S. on September 25th of 1974. Inspired heavily by Todd Browning's film Freaks from 1932. Jack Cardiff directed, written by Edward Mann and Robert D. Weinbach. This movie is one that I can safely say that you had never heard of, at least. Is that correct?
It's quite the assumption, Alex, but it is correct.
Well, I mean, if anyone's listening for the first time, I can't even say resident horror fan because I don't front myself as an expert in the field, but definitely of the two, I'm the fan, and particularly a fan of 70s horror. So when this got plopped onto our desk, I was very excited about it. But who did said plopping? Who threw this our way for this episode?
This was plopped by patron Dale Bridges. He who wrote the book The Mean Reds that we plugged a while ago. It is funny because in the book the main character is a film student, and there's several passages in the book that talk about the kinds of movies that he likes to watch that inspire his filmmaking and that of his friends. And I told Dale when he threw this our way, I was like, this sounds like the kind of movie that your main character would watch. So I'm excited. That was really the only thing that I had in mind when I was watching it. That, and of course it's Doctor Loomis. But Dale Bridges, we'll hear what he thinks about this movie in the second half of the show in Real Talk. But he sent us an email to read, so we'll find out then if he likes it or not. But this is the opening salvo, and I don't know, Alex. I mean, you're right. The only Mutations I was familiar with before now were the ones in the X-Men. That's my thing.
You were familiar with the new mutants, not necessarily the old mutants.
tried really hard as I was writing my notes to try to make like a Loomis as Charles Xavier joke, but it just didn't happen. This was too divorced from the Marvel universe for me to make that happen. But yes, as I was watching it, I also thought this is a movie that Alex, if he wasn't aware of it, like this probably was like a big warm embrace for you. It's just like a lot of practical effects and weird shit.
Yeah, dude, 70s horror, it's hard to go wrong, because even if it's bad, it's still going to be so fucking weird that you're like, all right, why not? And for the most part, in the 70s, the directors had the wherewithal to keep it between 80 and 90 minutes, sometimes even like 70 if you get really lucky. But yeah, this was released in 1974, a time frame we're pretty close to here. 74 to 78, having done things like Jaws, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Grease in the past. So this is an era of time that we're pretty familiar with.
A bunch of horror movies and Grease.
Oh yeah, I guess Jaws is considered a horror movie. Nowadays it would be like an action thriller, but in those days, that's what it was known for. People were scared to death of it. Star Wars was 77. Okay, so yeah, that was in the same time frame. A lot going on.
The original Fly, when was that released?
The original Fly, wasn't that 1958?
Was it? Okay.
For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we've covered both the original Fly from 1958 and also the Jeff Goldblum remake from 1986. You can go back and check out those episodes if you're curious on how we feel about it. But let's get to the topic du jour. We don't want to keep our patrons, and in this case, our specific patron, Dale, waiting any longer.
You may think you are normal, but you are all the product of mutations. Your ancestors, our ancestors, were freaks.
But before we jump into the mutations, we do want to thank any and all first-time listeners and explain what it is we do here on the Contrarians. We rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. That is our battle cry. We will find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, a lot of times known as and accompanied by that wonderful IP, that trademarked logo of Certified Fresh, and make a case for maybe why that movie not necessarily doesn't deserve that high score, but maybe just how that high score doesn't tell the whole story of the movie, and goes out of its way to blanket some of the issues, be it storytelling, acting, directing, bad effects, poor score, that type of thing. Conversely, find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is lowly rated, one of those nasty green splotches known as rotten, usually shoot for about 30% and below, and as you could guess, we'll make a case for the positive merit behind that film, build it up, talk about bold storytelling, underrated acting, underrated, twists and turns, great soundtrack score, whatever we can find to say, hey, maybe this 25% score doesn't really mean what you think it means. We do this in an attempt to, number one, show the shit is subjective. If you set your mind to it, you can be as truly over the moon or as cynical about something as you want to be. And also that those scores on Rotten Tomatoes don't always tell the whole story. And, there's a lot of... it's used as a powerful metric these days, and the people that use that metric don't do any work to explain, what it means. And so Julio and I kill some time, kill a few hours every week doing that work for them. So we will take those checks, those endorsement deals and royalty checks anytime that you want to. Julio, a little bit different today, as the Mutations does not have a score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, this is one of those. I mean, we've done a couple of these before. Usually, they're patron requests or requests from friends of the show. Like I think when we did the Doctor Who movie, that was a request from Hans, the guy that did our logo, and this is one of those. I'm gonna call them ghost tomatoes. I don't know if you've looked it up, Alex, on the Rotten Tomatoes website. So this is one of those where there's not enough reviews for them to give you either a rotten or a fresh. So instead what they give you is this, appropriately, I guess, a black and white ghostly tomato.
It looks like the tomato passed away, and this is like the in memoriam black and white photo of it.
Yes. But then next to it.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm just excited to cut you off because there's typically these audience scores, and I've never paid too much attention to them. I didn't realize there was a fresh and a rotten audience score. Yes. Icon.
I guess I would call it a sad popcorn tub because it's been just dumped on the floor. There's still popcorn there. It's just,
but they're still color coded. Like the good audience score is a red bucket, and then the negative audience score is a green bucket. Which, being an alum of the University of North Texas, I take umbrage with the negative use of green. But yeah, it's like, isn't the one that's like happy? The popcorn's like piled high and like standing upright. Isn't that
glistening with butter?
It's been layered, and yeah, this one's like half empty and knocked over, like we would see in oh so many children's movies back in the day.
It just gives you the impression that the person that bought that popcorn stopped caring, left the movie, kicked the bucket to the side.
They kicked it over on their way out, not even out of defiance, just out of pure apathy. They just kicked it over.
Yeah, in this case, this little overturned bucket of popcorn symbolizes a 37% audience score out of more than 500 ratings. So most of 37% out of those 500 ratings were like, nope, fuck the mutations. We don't care. So that still kind of hurts.
Yeah, clearly an increased effort from the audience versus the critics on this one. They wanted to make sure they know they did not care for this movie. So we will use that audience score as kind of our, we'll write it on a Post-it and stick it up on the blackboard while we work through this. So being 37%, Julio, we will be, in the first portion of this, we'll be going to bat for the mutations and standing up for Dr. Sam Loomis and his crimes against humanity in this film. If listeners want to know how we really feel about the Freak Maker, the Mutations, or whatever the movie of the day is, they just have to tune in to part 2, the second half of the episode.
That's correct. The second half of every episode, aptly titled Real Talk, that's where we tell you how we really feel. We forget about the tomato meter, the audience score, what have you. We just tell you how we experience the movie, as we've already set up. Like, Alex, this is the kind of thing that should be in his wheelhouse. So does that mean that he liked it, though? We'll find out then. And you'll also find out if I was able to look past my usual problems with the horror genre and old movies and maybe was I able to appreciate these old mutants? And then, of course, that's where we find out, as I said, how Dale feels. Is he trolling us? Does he just throw a movie that he doesn't like out here just to see if we could actually be positive about it? Or is he really a fan of this? Based on the fact that he has characters in his novel really enjoy these type of movies, I mean, I think that kind of hints at how he feels, but we could be wrong. We'll find out then. Before that, like Alex said, we're going to be positive because it's time for Contrarians Corner.
So as I mentioned previously, The Mutations, released September 25th, 1974, wasn't able to find anything in the way of a box office or a budget. I mean, movies, especially horror movies back in those days, it's like, all right, here's 2 cartons of cigarettes, make a movie, that type of thing. But definitely seems to have a legacy in its own right. I mean, a lot of movies with Donald Pleasence attached do, and any movie like this from that just insane, Gatling gun of 70s horror, you'll be able to find someone in the world that loves it. But as we mentioned, the overwhelming majority did not. So Julio, where are you sourcing your quotes from, and what are they saying? What's their beef? You
would think that I would go to the Rotten Tomatoes website for the quotes like we usually do. Like I said, 500 reviews. So we could pull quotes from there. But honestly, we've kind of developed this practice of falling on Letterboxd whenever Rotten Tomatoes doesn't have anything that looks interesting to read on the show. So I went to Letterboxd because also Letterboxd makes it really easy to... now this sounds like an ad for Letterboxd, but makes it really easy to sort reviews by star rating. So I could just select a range to where I only got 2-star and 1-star reviews for the Mutations, so I could read the negative quotes for this part.
If they want to jump on, we'll take money from them. We will suck the Letterboxd teat every week if we need to, man.
Yeah, I mean, nobody said that we had principles.
That's right.
But yeah, if you want to hear positive quotes, those come in Real Talk. I have 4 quotes from Letterboxd, starting with Dell, who gave this movie 2 stars and says, "It's weird that Jack Cardiff, a cinematographer of such renown and genius, creator of some of the most beautiful images in cinema, should direct something so sleazy and worthless. And weirder still that it looks so bland. Hardly a passion project, I'm sure."
Oh, worthless, damn.
Sleazy. Isn't that part of the appeal of a 70s movie? We could get away with a lot more sleaze than we do these days.
I think that would be categorically correct, yes.
I wasn't even alive in the 70s, but I still somehow I miss the times where we could just have casual nudity and it wasn't a big deal.
And there is casual nudity with a capital C in this movie, man.
Yes.
I assume that a review was also kind of bummed because it was the last film that Jack Cardiff would direct.
Yeah, there were a couple of reviews that mentioned that. And but I was like, I'm not familiar with Mr. Cardiff at all. Are you? I'm
going through his filmography right now, and there's a few movies on here I've heard of, but I can't say to a certainty that I've ever seen them. More to come as I look through these.
Well, while you do that, next, T-Culture Vulture gives it 2 stars and says, a movie is going to be quality when the first 10 minutes are stock footage of nature scenes. I know they're being sarcastic, but I mean, yes, that is an awesome opening. It really grabs your attention.
In the years after this film was released, there would be a channel created that's literally just that 24 hours a day. So joke's on you, man.
You just you're glued to the screen waiting for Donald Pleasence to pop in.
Watch the Discovery Channel for 4 days and you just, what would you be on? Meth or something? You should snort some meth and think you're going to watch the Mutations and then you just watch fucking Nature Channel for 4 days.
Chris gives it 1 star and says Freaks plus Little Shop of Horrors plus The Island of Dr. Moreau equals this complete mess. I haven't seen The Island of Dr. Moreau all the way through, and I've only seen the Brando remake. I see where this guy's coming from, having seen Little Shop of Horrors and being familiar with Freaks. I don't think it adds up to a complete mess, though. It adds up to, it's like when you combine awesome things, a glorious mess, not a complete mess.
The person who invented the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup would argue that combining 2 great things worked out pretty well in their favor.
Chocolate plus peanut butter plus The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Sign me up.
Yes. And we're going to close with Brent, who gives it 2 stars and says, I fell asleep during the last 10 minutes and I don't really feel I missed anything. Brent, you fell asleep during the best part of the movie. Yeah.
You missed the climax in all, every sense.
Where it all got tied together. I feel like if you miss a big chunk of a movie, but especially if you miss the ending, you really have no business giving it a score.
I would concur with that because as we've discussed on here at length, endings can sometimes make or break an entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's movies that sucks and have a great ending.
Yes, I think that you can still log it, but just do the honorable thing and refrain from actually giving a score.
Yes, like we did with Fabulous Forensics. What's the movie we did? Neil Breen.
Fateful Findings.
Fateful Findings. All right. Yeah.
And we watched the whole thing.
We did, but we did the honorable thing of just not giving it a score because it wasn't for us.
It was way beyond our scope.
It was. Not beyond our scope, though. The Mutations.
We don't know yet how these mutations happen. But we do know that mutations can be induced. So that instead of endless accidental changes, we may be able to create the mutations of our choice.
Whose story is this? Is this a story of Professor Noelter?
No, he's the bad guy. I'm going to say this is the story of the American foreign exchange student that, much like that last review I read, completely misses the climax. It's I was gonna say Igor Lynch's story.
Yeah, Brad Harris, Brian is the exchange student, I think. As with a lot of horror movies, specifically 70s horror movies, it's light on plot, so it's not really that much to recount, but there is really weird aspects to it. So the beginning of this, as Julio referenced in one of the reviews, is basically stock footage of nature and plants and cells and organisms and what can happen through mutation and that type of shit. We learned this is a lecture from the doc, Dr. Sam Loomis, Donald Pleasence, as Professor Noelter, and explaining, through mutation, we're going to be able to do all this shit. There's going to be clones. We're going to be able to recreate dinosaurs. Some stuff that if you're watching in 1974, you're probably like, yeah, why not? And then,
And then you cut to 1993, and Spielberg is like, "Here you go, I did it."
The Doc would have still been alive at that point, so he's old. Halloween 6, Donald Pleasence in the theater. I told you. But this, it just picks up right away, as is needed for me to truly enjoy a movie. Olga Anthony, who plays Bridget, a very buxom, attractive young gal, a redhead, is stalked in the park with by what appears to be the Elephant Man. Did you get immediate vibes from that?
Yes. My first thought, because I knew I was going to be discussing this with you, it was like, oh, that's not CGI. That's just some dude with prosthetic makeup on his face. Alex is going to be so happy. And I get it.
Yes, but it kind of sticks out, and we'll get to why here in a moment.
Actually, this is the perfect time for me to correct myself from something I said, I think, last episode. Because that guy's Tom Baker. Tom Baker plays the Elephant Man here. And I said, hey, Tom Baker from when we did the Doctor Who movie. Okay, I was only half right. Tom Baker is one of the many, many Doctor Who's that have, graced the planet with their presence. But he was not in the movie we watched.
Okay.
It's Sylvester something. He was not. So I'm sorry. I'm sure all Doctor Who fans were just cussing me out while I was innocently trying to drum up the interest. Trying to get my co-host excited about this movie. I really, all I needed to say was Donald Pleasence. But anyway, Tom Baker, he plays the big, strong, self-proclaimed ugly man here. No, I guess they gave him that title. He didn't give it to himself.
Yes, Lynch is his given name. Not unlike Patrick Wilson and John Hamm in the A-Team movie. But, that's a different story for a different day, or a past day, I should say. We already covered that. A clear face mutation, much like The Elephant Man. This movie, to its benefit, it goes grocery shopping. Edward Mann and Robert D. Weinbach, when they wrote this, and of course Cardiff, when he put it to film, they went grocery shopping. They went and they're like, all right, going to take a little bit of Freaks here, going to take a little bit of The Fly here, going to take The Elephant Man here, that type of thing. And, it works because it's kind of like, the Justice League or some shit of body horror or whatever the fuck they call it today, because they can't just say horror because everything has to be special.
A healthy dose of boobs. Just add flavor.
As was the style at the time. I was curious about Olga Anthony. She looked like kind of like a starlet of what would have been, in for horror movies at that point in time. Kind of reminded me of like an Ingrid Pitt, like good big hair, and then obviously kind of, that's what. Not saying it's right, but they cast on things like measurements and whatnot back in the day. So when she showed up in this, I was immediately like, well, she's not going to last long, and long she does not last.
Look, it's not even exclusive to the 70s. We still, I think, by and large, cast, not we, society, Hollywood cast.
Society.
Based on looks. It's just that maybe the looks have changed a little bit as far as what they go for. But it's still, are you telling me that Brad Pitt gets roles because he has talent, or because he looks like Brad Pitt?
Cast Brad Pitt as the Elephant Man. I'm trying to think. I can't do a Brad Pitt impression, but just think of him with like fucking the slicked back hair, kind of like the length of Moneyball, and him just being like, "I'm a human being," like looking all hot and shit,
eating a Twinkie.
Yes, just aggressively. Holy shit, it was apropos that I name dropped Ingrid Pitt, one, to curry up favor with horror fans, but two, Vampire Lovers, which is a movie I'm a big fan of. This Olga Anthony character was in it. So there you go.
Everything is connected.
I'm not proud, Julio, that I've seen so many of these that my brain's able to just put shit like that together, like effortlessly. It's not good. She was also in Scars of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee.
That one I haven't heard of. I remember you bringing up Vampire Lovers before.
Well, Christopher Lee was Dracula for a while.
I know him from The Lord of the Rings.
Brother.
I know he used to be Dracula.
Okay. I thought you were kidding. I was about to tell everyone listening to get on Twitter and bully you for that. I
know him, Bela Lugosi, and then Karloff was Frankenstein. right?
Yeah, and you should have been like, I know Bela Lugosi, I know Christopher Lee, and I know Tom Cruise or something like that.
Gary Oldman.
Yes, he became Mecha Dracula in that, man. All right, so Lynch here, our Elephant Man, and he's accompanied by Burns, yes, an actor by the name of Michael Dunn, who it appears as though there's like a chain of command here. Burns and Lynch kind of do stuff together, but Lynch reports back to Loomis, Professor Noelter, and we get a legitimate peek into the mind of Noelter early on when we see like his home and his lab and petting this rabbit. I was like, no, that's a pretty rabbit. And then he feeds it to this plant because, the opening is explaining, he really focuses and fixates on the Venus flytrap and explains how that works. And what he's doing here is creating half plant, half living being hybrids. And he needs subjects to conduct on because he's done it with like rats and shit. And he's obviously made this big plant that's eating rabbits, but he's continuously trying to, manufacture these mutations, but he needs subjects, test subjects. So in this case, poor Bridget, Olga Anthony, is kidnapped by Lynch and taken to be experimented upon. And we find out, Julio, what's the reason that Lynch is agreeing to do all this?
Much like Benjamin Grimm in the Fantastic Four, he's hoping to be cured, to be fixed.
We have to wait.
What about me? How long do I have to wait?
I have told you when
I can't wait! Maybe there's no way to cure me.
I found it very powerful that this man is so discontent with the way he looks that he doesn't care that the way that Loomis will probably help him is by turning him into a plant man. But he's like, I don't care. That's a step up from being an elephant man.
It's better than this shit, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in Loomis's experiments that indicates that he'd be able to make him look like the average dude in 1974.
It's the clean slate in The Dark Knight Rises of like, I wish there was a scene of Loomis being like, you actually bought into that? It's a bunch of bullshit. There's nothing I can do.
There's a point in the movie where he's like, come here, look at the, at my latest experiment. This shows that I can cure you. And Lynch looks through the microscope like he can tell what that means.
It could be like, a Fruit Loop under there, and he's looking at it and he's like, yes. That's why I want to believe Loomis is just like a bigger asshole and more vindictive towards everybody. He's just like, making this guy look like an idiot. But yeah, he's like, look at this. And the guy's like, oh yes, I believe it.
So, Alex, I was gonna say that this movie had me at Donald Pleasence as a mad scientist, but also much like you, I think this movie just had me at Donald Pleasence. It's just that once I saw him put that lab coat on, the white lab coat on, which is crazy. Is this exclusive to England or what? Because this is taking place in England. He puts it on like he's putting on one of those robes that they give you at the hospital. You know what I mean? Like, sticking your arms in the sleeves through the front, and then he ties the back. That's not standard issue lab coat.
It gives the feel of like a butcher in a slaughterhouse, though, because that's what they do. So they have the front towel. Chefs do that same thing too. It makes it way creepier than it would be. But they could have gone for like the one comedic shot of Lynch comes in or something, and he's got his lab coat on, and then he turns around to go to the counter, and he's completely naked under it. Loomis's ass in the wind.
Or just having through the entire scene for 5 minutes, he's trying to tie the two strings together in the back.
And then fuck it. And he throws it at the plant and eats it.
One of my favorite shots in the movie is, what's the name of this one? The first victim?
Bridget,
yeah. When Bridget starts coming out of the coma that she's been in for like a day, I think. And her eyes open, and the first thing she sees is Loomis and Lynch looking down at her. It's just, the shot is from her point of view, and it's just the heads of Loomis and Lynch there. That should have been the movie's poster.
Dude, were they trying to make Sam a heartthrob in this? Because because there's several shots of just lingering and like
the baby blues,
penetrating eye contact. Yeah, like Sinatra. Who you got? The doc on the case here, and it was very hypnotizing.
Did you feel that there was, I wouldn't say sexual tension, but sexual playfulness in his classroom whenever he was teaching? You know how like in the Indiana Jones movies when they show Harrison Ford lecturing before he goes on an adventure and all the students are just looking at him like he's a dreamboat because he is. Did you feel that this was the British version of that sequence whenever Loomis is just going on about plants and clones and the future of humanity, and then there's all the girls in the class are just really paying attention, and the guys are feeling threatened, so they're making jokes and not taking him seriously?
That, and he also has the moment where he's walking behind them before class and kind of playfully interjects into their conversation of perhaps it's one of the mutants we discussed in class or something like that. You know, he's got his overcoat on and his hands in his pockets, just looking cool in a Sam Loomis type of way.
The girls sigh after him.
My note here says massive cancer ray because, you know, he shows off one of his experiments to his class in the lecture hall, and it's actually very useful. Like, it's a very useful invention. Undecomposes shit. I guess
first it decomposes it, so it can be used for evil or for good. He's created a super villain weapon.
But yeah, it shows when the scene begins, it shows this orange like decaying, and then it, you know, there's a smash cut to just the lecture hall, and this ray is like, it's legitimately like 10 feet long and like 7 feet off the ground. It looks like the ray that Arnold Schwarzenegger tries to use to freeze Gotham at the end of Batman and Robin.
This is probably the most British scene in the movie because this dude just demonstrated this artifact of massive power that can change the way that the world lives. Because, you know, he can basically reverse aging, either accelerate or reverse aging. And his class just kind of shrugs it off. They're like, oh, that's cool. What's your next trick? What will you do for an encore, Dr. Loomis?
That's also a peak college student. Like, yeah, all right, well, who's going to use that? Or it's one of those, man, like, those lecture classes I took at 8 a.m., dude could have come out and been like, here, I have this machine that duplicates $100 bills and can never be detected, and I'm going to give it to you if you can tell me what 2 + 2 is. And be like, I don't fucking care, man.
You know, those guys, 10 years later, once they finally come out of the college haze, they're going to find themselves in the middle of the night thinking, did that guy really make an orange rot and then bring it back? Did that really happen?
I mean, that's how everyone's college memories are. There's always, you know, 1 or 2 dozen things that you just have stuck in your mind. And once in a while, I'll be like, did that happen? In this case, did that orange just go to shit in front of me and he brought it back to life? And then he made a lizard woman?
That was for the final. They just didn't get to the end of the semester. I was disappointed. I mean, I like this movie, but I was disappointed that the magic aging ray didn't play a role in the climax of the movie. I really thought that it was going to be turned either on Lynch or Loomis or somebody, and we were going to see them just rot, you know, at the speed of light. But that didn't happen. And I was a little bummed, but I guess in a way that was Jack Cardiff playing against expectations.
It would have been awesome if, like, Loomis used the reverse ray on himself, and in the next scene he had like long flowing hair.
He looked like Paul Rudd.
The eyes were exactly the same though, because old DP's got some baby blues. So as was mentioned already several times, clear influence from the 1932 film Freaks on display throughout this, and a big part of this is the college students. We have Brian, the U.S. exchange student, Hetty, who looks an awful lot like Jan Levison Gould from The Office. The first shot of her, I did like a double take because obviously I knew it wasn't. Is her name? Is it Melody Harding? Harding.
We've brought her up before, like recently, because we had to look it up. Melora Harding.
Melora Hardin. The Muzak version is Melody Harding. Melora Hardin and Julie Ige. Get on Ancestry.com. See where it matches up. I'm sure it's somewhere down there. Brian, Hetty, Lauren, and Tony, the array of college students that we're dealing with here, they go to the carnival that's in town, and part of the carnival is the freak show. And this being 1974, this was still in full effect. My mom actually says she remembers being a little girl and going to like the state fair and there being a freak show there. She looks back on it as like, one of the dark parts of our country's history. When she talks about it, she's like, I can't believe they used to do that. And,
I can't believe I paid 15 cents.
2 bits a gander is what I paid for it. And in this, it, much like Freaks, despite being made 42 years after the fact, it utilizes actual circus performers. And the opening credits, I don't know if you caught, like, gives a thanks to whoever their promoter was, and then lists them all like with their name and their gimmick name. Did you catch that?
Oh, no, I didn't. I was too distracted by the plants growing before my eyes.
It's such a carny thing because it's thanks to Big Top Joe for his band of freaks, and then it lists them individually and has their character names, I guess, as it
thanks
were.
Thanks to Mr. McMahon.
Yeah. God. It's true. If Vince loaned a bunch of wrestlers to a movie, it would say the same thing. Thanks to Vince McMahon for his band of circus freaks.
And the feature attraction of our show, all the way from the roof of the world, from the snow-capped Himalayas, the lizard woman of Tibet.
I guess, in my humble opinion, maybe you're too jaded to be as taken by this sequence as I was, but to me, this is the most memorable part of the movie, the centerpiece.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so of just the show, which is just they go in and then Burns introduces his X-Men. He's just like, this is the pretzel man, and this is the bearded woman, and this is the dude that can get needles through his body without feeling pain, and so on. And I mean, even I could tell that there was no trickery, or at least there was no CGI. It all looked pretty convincing, pretty very, very practical. And I don't know how this played in 74. That was the moment where I suddenly had to like pump the brakes and take the movie seriously. I mean, I was having a good time, but this is where I just had to reckon with what I was watching. And that was like, from the 2023 sensibility, it was kind of appalling. And I'm glad you brought up what your mom says about this, because unlike, a bunch of college students and older people, whatever, just flock into this tent, and then they act horrified at these other people that are, they just happen to be born with, some things that are different, and I couldn't tell. Just educate me, Alex. So in 74, is this playing, is this meant to play that way to the audience? Like I reacted to where, it's showing you the, in quotation marks, like the freaks, but you're really supposed to be kind of appalled by the reactions of the audience? Or is it playing as if you're supposed to react like the audience? They're just showing you these weirdos, and you're just to freak you out. Is that, how is it supposed to be playing in 74?
I don't know, because it's accompanied with that discussion that Brian and Tony have. Of Tony thinks that Noelter is a quack. He's mad, whereas Brian thinks he's a brilliant man and capable of some potentially great things.
Well, Brian has the benefit of actually having been to the lab, so he's seen the giant like Super Mario with plants.
He's been told and shown.
Yes. He saw a little rabbit meet his demise.
I think it is up for the audience of how they want to interpret it, what they want to take away from it.
Oh, it's a Rorschach test.
Again, it upsets me. You've never seen Freaks, but that's part of it. In the end, it is a horror movie, but part of the movie is like, what's wrong? The exploitation of these people, or is this how they make a living, and the people that laugh at them are the real, morbid ones, that type of thing. Did you catch one of our patrons was in the audience at this freak show?
What?
I mean, I knew he was old. I didn't realize Brandon Curtis was that old, because the one character has a pun for every single performer that comes out.
Yes,
and it cuts back. It's I joke. It's the character Tony. But every character that comes out, he has a pun that I could just hear Curtis's laugh, reverberating from the back of the theater if we all went and saw this together.
It's funny the way that they set up Tony, because he's he's that guy, right? He's also mouthing off during the class when Loomis is teaching. He always has like a smart ass comment, and then he seems to be not comedic relief. It's that type of character that's supposed to be kind of annoying. But then towards the end of the movie, as the story progresses, he's kind of heroic, and then ends up being a tragic figure, which I was not expecting from this type of movie. It just shows how unfamiliar I am with horror movie tropes in '74.
He's a human being. So the new attraction is the Lizard Girl. And as I think it's like a 2 bits of gander thing, like half pound, you can come look at it. And they go to do so, but Lynch immediately recognizes them as the friends of Bridget. And on top of that, they recognize that Burns is wearing Bridget's medallion. So he kind of gives them he looks over their shoulders and sees Lynch, and Lynch does the kind of like closes his eyes and shakes his head side to side, like, don't do it. Or no, he doesn't close his eyes. He like stares at him like he's going to murder him. He has his eyes like wide open. So they're turned away. They leave that night, and Tony's very dismissive of the whole thing, but he can't shake the idea that there could potentially be this half female, half lizard creature out there, and goes.
Oh, you think that's why he goes back? I thought that he went back because he couldn't shake off the idea that medallion was Bridget's medallion. See, that's why I thought that he was more heroic than I originally expected. Because it's like, oh, he actually cares for his friend so much that he's going to sneak back into this creepy carnival in the middle of the night.
But the first place he goes is to the lizard shack.
I don't know. See, the movie, I guess it's to its benefit that it's creating this stimulating conversation because
well,
I was surprised.
The main thing
when it happened, I was like, man, this guy's smarter than I thought because he's connected the dots, right? There's a mysterious lizard woman. My friend is missing, and her medallion was was being worn by a guy that was guarding the entrance to the lizard woman's lair. Maybe the lizard woman is my friend. Let's see.
But they're all concerned. You know, they say, I can't shake the feeling of that medallion. So they all should have gone back together like Scooby-Doo style. But I think this dude, was just so like, I got to see this lizard. Like, I got to see what's going on over here. And if I figure out what happened to Bridget, that's cool too.
Well, I mean, we know that Brian had bigger things to do. That's why he didn't go. He's a foreign exchange student that's getting laid in England. So that's really where all his free time is going.
Yeah, what more do you need? Anyway, doesn't work out well for Tony because he sees the lizard via he uses his lighter to kind of light the room, and it's a pretty terrifying sight. And
it's not a lizard though. It looks more like a ape sapien.
Or like a slee stack. He's caught, apprehended, beaten down. He sees a lizard woman, though, so at least that curiosity, that itch was scratched. The performers, the circus performers, have a party, so this literally is lifted from freaks. Culminating.
One of them says, "You're one of us."
Well, there you go. You at least know that.
Well, I've seen the clip. Even out of context, I mean, or even without the context of the rest of the movie, it's kind of unsettling.
This culminates. It's one of the performers' birthdays, and Lynch, they ask him to have a drink with them. It's like, you're one of us. And then he freaks out and, no pun intended, breaks everything and says, I am not one of you. And
drools a lot.
He does. Poor guy. He ends up going to a lady of the night, a prostitute, in probably the most accessible and humanizing scene in the whole movie. You learn some more about him in that he just literally just wants to be loved. It doesn't erase the horrendous things that he's doing, but he goes and pays this woman just to say, I love you. Kind of a funny scene in a really dry, British type of way too, because she sees him and she says something like, handsome one, aren't you? She says, don't worry. I've dealt with my fair share in this job.
I think MVP, this lady. I didn't even catch her. She doesn't get a name. She's just a person that hooks up with Lynch.
She's billed as prostitute. A simpler time was 1974. Lisa Collins was the actress's name.
Yeah, she barely raises an eyebrow when he takes his hat off and reveals himself. She's like, oh, okay, so it's going to be that kind of night.
Twisted world of prostitution. It costs more for her to say I love you than just, doing the deed. I wasn't kidding, Julio. I do think that's one of the most, if not the most humanizing scene in the movie. Would you agree or disagree?
No, I agree. It definitely makes him a tragic character, and he was one of the bad guys. I mean, he still is, because it's not like this suddenly changes what he's doing. After this sequence, he goes back to kidnapping people to and take them to Loomis's lab. But I guess when this happened, Alex, were you expecting a climax where Lynch turned on Loomis? Like, they're humanizing him so that we can that serves as a bridge to him developing a conscience and then turning against Loomis because he thinks that he's gone too far? Or were you like, no, this is just a one-off, but then he's still going to be the bad guy until the end of the movie?
Honestly, in my mind, what I was kind of forecasting was a thing where Lynch sacrifices himself to take down Noelter with him, which obviously didn't turn to be the case, but it at least kept you guessing. But then in the end, he turns out just to be a bad guy. There's two bad guys in this.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that they just didn't give him enough time to to really turn.
Just tell me. Just say.
Oh, come on, love. I haven't got all night. What?
Just say, I love you.
So the lizard woman dies. It's another experiment gone awry. You know, she was alive, fortunately, long enough for them to squeeze a few pennies off of people. But Burns says, you know, she just started breathing funny and then died. Meanwhile, Tony is the latest to be experimented on, I should say. But the difference is he kind of came to during it and got away. As we see the operating room, that's it's completely torn apart. There's a trail of blood, and also Loomis gets on the horn with Lynch and says, you know, I think I've done it, but he got away. And Loomis, you know, is disheveled, and his blood pressure and, you know, pulse never rises at all, no matter what's happening, though. And that's what makes his character so scary. I read that was his thing because I guess the Professor Noelter character is supposed to be very, you know, it's alive. And Donald Pleasence was just like, no, I'm going to play this pretty much the way I play everything else. It's going to be very calm and collected, and it's going to make it that much more memorable, which it does.
Yeah, you're right, because he's when he's making that phone call and telling Lynch he has blood on his face. He's just like, get me a new one. The one I had is gone. How would you describe what Tony turns into? Because he's different. He's not Ape Sapiens. I thought he looked a little like Swamp Thing, but I don't know if you're familiar with Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah, dude! I played with Swamp Thing toys when I was a little kid. I dubbed him Plant Man in my notes. But he's basically the human hybrid of that plant that Loomis feeds the rabbit to at the beginning of the movie. Because he has the chest cavity that opens. It's not even the chest. It's like from his neck down to his crotch area is like a Venus flytrap. When we see him at first, he's kind of in mid-transition when he goes to see, what's his girlfriend's name? Lauren, because it knocks her into shock when she sees him for the first time. But then we see a transient, a hobo, whatever vernacular you want to use, gets drunk and passes out like on a bridge, and then he just kind of comes up and he eats this dude. It's pretty fucking metal, but he's basically a human that's half Venus flytrap, half human.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the movie brings it up at some point because Loomis's whole thing was that this was going to be progress. Like, imagine, if you will, the combination of animal and plant, and so you have this organism that moves around like an animal, like a man, but it absorbs energy from the sun. So imagine we don't have to eat anymore. But then, of course, the creatures that he's creating need to feed, and they feed on people. So I think that when he claims that he's done it, I think he's a little too, he's getting ahead of himself. I think there's one big detail that he hasn't quite figured out yet.
What purpose does this serve?
Yes, you did it, but why?
Is it Morgan Freeman in The Dark Knight that says, but at what cost? Is that... Yeah, because Batman wiretaps the entire city. That's Morgan Freeman shames him with that. Lauren's in shock. He goes to see Hetty and covers himself with a blanket and just explains in broken speech because the plant's almost completely taken over him. It basically comes down to must get Noelter, and then he runs out.
Dude, I was expecting an insect politics kind of scene. I was a little bummed that he didn't get a big speech, But he did what he had to do. I guess instead of the instant politics speech, we got a scene where Lauren is taking a bath before he breaks into her apartment. It was, again, the casual
as
nudity.
was the style at the time.
Yeah, it's like let's see a little more skin before the next creepy scene.
There's a point in time where you couldn't watch any scene of pornography in the history of pornography at a moment's notice on your phone. And a part of the appeal was if you went to see a horror movie, you were likely going to see some boobs. And that is what made a lot of horror movies a lot of money. Not saying it's wrong. Not saying it's right. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying.
It's just how it was.
It's how it was. We could, as humans, we could have done a whole lot of worse things than we did, such as freak shows and sideshow attractions at the circus.
And creating
half
monsters.
And never getting Donald Pleasence a fucking Oscar. That's a big problem we had too.
Maybe not for this movie. Let's not ask for that much.
No. Yeah. I mean, just in general, that man's body of work. And I mean, we've discussed he's legitimately riveting in some things, Wake and Fright specifically. But back to the matter at hand, the way this scene is ended and that Tony flees is that Lynch shows up at Hetty's apartment. He snatches her, takes her in as the new crash test dummy to see what kind of plant being Loomis can make. Brian shows up at her apartment, sees the note that says, this is all Nolter's fault. Goes to the mansion, the laboratory to shut it all down. When he gets there, he's confronted by Lynch and they get into a bit of a scuffle. And again, this movie took some things from Freaks, and the band of circus performers, freaks as they're called in this context, show up, all with spectacular aim when it comes to throwing knives, as they're continuously, like darts, just bullseye on Lynch here, and he's backpedaling further and further. It's like a Hell in a Cell match in wrestling when they're getting close to the edge, and you're like, oh, someone's gonna fall off, because at Professor Nolter's compound, there's a big wall of attack dogs. So if he falls into them, he's a done dada.
Now Brian misses all this because he got knocked out in the first 2 minutes of this scene.
Oh yeah, he could not fight for shit. Lynch pushed him and then took a rock and hit him in the head with it. Right?
Yeah,
because he was unconscious because he was about to kill him, and then I think it was Popeye threw his knife at him because he had teased earlier potentially stabbing Lynch. But
no, I think Burns does it first because that's the big thing. Burns, turns on him, and
finally,
yeah. But they're like, "Are you crazy? You're going to create an international incident. That man is American."
He's right about to fall into the dogs, and he makes his last, ditch effort of cowardice where he says, "You see, I'm one of you," and they say, "Fuck that." And he falls and is
you ruined our party.
Yeah, I wish it had been the birthday girl that did the final the death blow, but can't be a completely perfect movie. But he falls, he's eaten, he's mauled, attacked by dogs, and we get one shot of them, fucking steak, raw meat, just ripping it off. Inside, Nolter's performing what would become his last experiment on Hetty, and Plant Man saves the day because for some reason Loomis has a fucking sunroof in his laboratory, and this guy, Superfly splashes through the glass and lands on Loomis and picks him up and then ingests him into his Venus flytrap. And then we get the grotesque imagery of Loomis's, depleted and drained corpse falling out of this dude's body. It's pretty fucking gnarly. And it's practical, Julio, so it's more memorable than,
So is it
Ant-Man?
Is it Donald Pleasence just covered in slime and
Brother,
whatever
that thing
prosthetics?
Was clearly a dummy. And you know what? I don't give a shit.
Well, that's where we differ. You know what? Commit. You have Donald Pleasence there. Just do it up. Paint him green. That's it. Do it both ways. And then audience test it. Just see what they like better. Also, the sunroof actually makes sense, Alex, because There's a bunch of plants in there, so they need sunlight.
Touche. I'm so used to like,
the movie not making sense.
Well, labs and shit being like underground or like, really heavily guarded fortresses that in my mind, it was just, Loomis just, in case the stars were out one night and he was working in the lab. But what you said makes sense. Yeah, by this point, the Great Escape, You Only Live Twice, Wake in Fright, as we mentioned, Eye of the Devil had happened. So I just imagined Jack Cardiff was like, all right, Donald, so we're going to paint your face green and then dump this corn syrup on you. The cleanup should take about 4 hours, but, it's just for this one shot. And Loomis is like, I'm not going to be doing that. And then just like walked into his trailer and shut the door behind him. Noelter has been stopped. Brian wakes up, comes in, frees Hetty, takes her to safety. Does Tony, do we see the fate of Tony, or does he just wander off and become one with nature?
No, he burns. He's engulfed in flames because the lab goes up in flames, and then there's a shot of him kind of like keeling over, and he's on fire.
You're right. So Noelter has been stopped. Sadly, Tony sacrifices himself in the process because the lab is engulfed in flames and he perishes in said fire. Brian awakes, is able to save Hetty, takes her back to his car, and everything's fine, everything's going to be okay, and they have one last embrace. And then we are treated to what appears to be like the before Christ era CGI here of Hetty's arm. We see it was too little too late, as she was already, her genes were mutated and she's becoming a plant because her arm starts to turn into a plant. And honestly, I joke, but the CG in this is better than the CG in X-Men Origins Wolverine. So there's a win for Cardiff and the crew.
Well, I mean, they didn't leak the unfinished version of the mutations. So
what is the scenario where the mutations had to be rushed out because a print leaked?
So she turns into Poison Ivy at the end, right? That's the implication. Because her arm turns green, but it doesn't look like she's like, her appearance is not deformed. And he's even making out with Brian. That's how the movie closes. They're in a full makeout session, even though their friends are dead and their teacher turned out to be a monster. But he's like, I love you too. And they make out, and then her arm turns green. Directed by Jack Cardiff.
Loved the font on the credits too. So unique. That slime green and whatnot. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we needed a Batman movie. Maybe this was the first stage. They were looking to a sequel to the Adam West 66 one. So they're like, all right, let's tease it here and see how the audiences react.
I just like that My Way started playing when the credits started rolling.
The post-credit scene with Adam West and Burt Ward running in was cut.
Well, that was the Mutations, Alex. I can safely say that it's unlike. I was gonna say unlike any movie that we've done before, but no, like you said, it has a little bit of The Fly. So I can say at least that part is there, but still.
Yeah, and we haven't dipped our toes into the obscure wild horror of 1970s. We've done like the hallmarks, like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but shit like this, things like the baby, crazy random shit of the 70s, we haven't dived into. So I'm glad we were able to do so, and at the request of a patron, makes it all the more special.
Yeah, because now we can blame him. If people don't like this episode, listen, that was Dale's pick. But let's find out if we actually liked it, and also what Dale thinks about the movie. Let's go to Real Talk.
Let's do.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kathy. Mr. Lynch! Aren't you going to have a drink with us to help celebrate Kathy's birthday?
You expect me to sit down with a bunch of freaks?